Algebra benchmark 8.1, solving quadratics. Now we have to use the zero product property at least twice, which means we have to factor at least twice. The first problem is already factored for us. It's in that right form. So we need to take the opposite of these. So if I have x times y equals 0, either x or y has to be 0. So either this quantity has to be 0 or this quantity has to be 0. So I can write the equations x minus 2 equals 0 or 3x plus 4 equals 0 and solve those equations. In this case, if I add 2 to both sides, I get x equals 2. And here, if I subtract 4 and then divide by 3, I get x equals negative 4/3. Now the shortcut to this, we can just look at it and say, well, what's the opposite of that negative 2? And that's positive 2. And then take that 3 and put it under the 4. And then change the sign. And then just put or between those two. So that's the fastest way to do that problem. And I'll use that shortcut later on too. Now here we're going to try to use the factor again, so we can use the quadratic, the ZPP twice. So I'll try to do this. I could go through this whole box thing. I think that would be a waste of time, because I just know these two numbers multiply to give me 3, so it's got to be 3 and 1. But they need to add or subtract, this way, smiley face wise, to give me a negative 1. And I can't take 3 and 1 to subtract to get 1, so I can't factor it. So I give up on that right away, and I use the quadratic formula. I'm going to write the quadratic formula over on the side here. X equals the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. So over here I have a is 1, the coefficient of x squared, b is negative 1, the coefficient of the x, and c is negative 3, the last number, because this equation is in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Please don't put an x in any of these, or an x squared or anything. It's just the coefficients. It's just the numbers. So I'll plug in these values in for the letters over there. I'll have x equals the opposite of b plus or minus b squared. Now right away I'm going to put a positive 1 instead of putting negative 1 squared like this. Your calculator will give you a negative 1 there for an answer probably. If you want, you can do this and put parentheses around it, and then you'll be safe. I just like to do that in my head first ahead of time. So negative 1 squared is 1, minus 4 times a, which is 1, I guess I'll write that down, times c, all over 2 times a, so 2 times 1. I'm asking you to show me what's under the square root, so maybe to be safe, go plus negative here. So I go negative 4 times negative 3 is positive 12, so I have 1 plus the 12 here, so this is a 13 under the square root, all over 2. So I need to type in my calculator 1 plus the square root of 13, hit equals, and then divide by 2. And then I need to do 1 minus the square root of 13, hit equals, and divide by 2. That's what that plus minus means, 2 separate problems. And when I solve the first one, I'll get 2.3. Approximately. I'm rounding it to the nearest tenth. And the second equation, I'll get negative 1.3. Hopefully get those answers. So x is approximately equal to those values. The next problem, again, I would try to factor, because we still need to use the ZPP one more time between these two problems. So I guess I'll go through the box. I'm just looking at this equation. I think I'm going to rewrite it so my x squared is on the other side, my negative 3, because I prefer to have a positive 3x squared, which means I'm going to move everything to the other side. Now you can do it the other way, and going through this box and the x thing, you can do it with a negative 3 in there. It just gets a little messy, so I prefer to keep that coefficient of x squared positive. So let's put that 3x squared in here. The negative 1 in the last one, multiply up on top. The middle term goes down below. And then two things that multiply to give me negative 3, but add or subtract to give me 2, so 3 and 1. And then sign-wise, I need the 2 to be negative, so I need that 3 to be negative. So when I add the negative 3 and the 1, I get the negative 2. And again, remember there's x, x, x on the bottom there. So I'll stick those in either box on the left side. Factor out what I can. So what goes into the negative 3 and the negative 1 here? Nothing except the negative 1. I see 2 negatives there, so I'll pull out the negative 1 there. Horizontally this way, I see a 3x. I just see an x, so I can only take out an x. Up and down, I can take out a 3 and an x. And over here, just a 1. I already took out the negative before. I'll maybe double check, multiply them in, make sure that everything works out. And it does. So here I have 3x plus 1 and x minus 1 or x plus negative 1. And this is all equal to 0. So my answer is then using my shortcut to put my 3 under the 1. So go x equals 1/3. And then it's positive, so I change the sign to negative. Or positive 1. Just change that sign. And the last equation, now I could factor it again. I didn't say you couldn't use factoring more than twice. You know, I'll do it both ways for you, so you can see another example of each one. So I'll have to write small. If I factor this, I'm going to put 3x squared. I'm going to bring everything to the right side again to keep that 3x squared positive. So plus 8x, and then plus 5 equals 0. Doesn't matter which side you put the equals 0 on. And then I'll use the box thing. Again, I'm going to write pretty small here. 3x squared, 5, 15x squared. Put the 8x at the bottom. Two things I multiply to give me 15, and add or subtract to give me 8, 3, and 5. And everything's positive. Plus here, so it's all going to be positive. So 3x, 5x, and then nothing comes out of here, just a 1. Just an x here, here's a 3x, and here's a 5. 5 goes into 5, 5 goes into 5x. So my factors are 3x plus 5 and x plus 1. So my answers, just to save space, I'll write up there. My answers, x, are the 3 under the 5, so negative 5/3, or negative 1. Now I'll see if I can squeeze with another color here the quadratic formula. Rewriting this, like it's already rewritten, so I'll just say a is 3, b is 8, and c is 5. So the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all over 2 times 3, 2 times a. And then solve under the square root. So I have negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 12 times 5 is 60, so I just have a 4 here. Because 64 minus 60, this part right here is 60, all over 6. So negative 8. Now this one happens to work out where the square root of 4 is an integer. So just write it negative 8 plus or minus 2 instead of typing it in my calculator. And then I'll write negative 8 plus 2 all over 6, or negative 8 minus 2 all over 6. Now these numbers are coming out nicely. There's no decimals here because I was able to factor it before. If I'm able to factor it, the numbers are going to come out nice here. Negative 8 plus 2, I guess I'm going up here. Negative 8 plus 2 is negative 6 over 6, which is negative 1. And the negative 8 minus 2 is negative 10 over 6, which reduces to negative 5/3. And those are the same answers I got before. So either method, you could factor it or you can use quadratic formula.